Mic check, mic check. Checking mic. 1, 2, 3. And the mic is good. Welcome everyone. We are live and alive from Apex 1 in Westfield, New Jersey. This is week 4 of the Formula 4 League. We are here racing at Mid-Ohio. We are at the layout with the chicanes. We currently have 9 drivers on the grid, minus the one for the spectators. So that'll make it 8 drivers on the grid for this week. Of course, we're at Mid-Ohio. Very bumpy track, as you could start to see here, but I am predicting this to be one of the tougher tracks of the calendar. Of course, all the bumps on the road. There you see as Victor makes his way through that second sector. It is most certainly not a traditional circuit. It's not a newly paved road, and I think it is definitely going to be causing all drivers to experience some traction loss all throughout the circuit. But the season has already been very exciting so far, so I'm looking forward to seeing what these drivers can do on the grid. But at the moment, we are currently in the 15-minute qualifying session. We have 11 and a half minutes to go. All drivers are still on their outlaps, bar Stephen Cortopassi and Victor Laduano. Those two drivers have already completed their first half. Stephen putting up a 125 flat and Victor putting up a 125.9. But just want to read you guys through very quickly the standings for the league. So at the moment, Matthew Devlin is winning. He is currently leading the league standings, although he is still in the pits configuring his setup. But Matthew, after 3 out of 5 weeks, is currently the leader of the league with 92 points. Just 7 points behind him is Brian. Brian has 85 points. And behind him is a very close battle. Both Shane and Steven are currently tied for third. Both drivers have 82 points, so those guys are just 3 points off of Brian. Brian is also not too far off of Matt, so we should be seeing a nice 3 to 4-way battle between those drivers. But also closely behind them is Victor Laduano. At the moment, Victor is sitting 4th in the overall league standings, although he has 79 points, so he is only 3 points behind Shane and Steven. In 5th place, we have David De Leon with 64 points. David did miss week 1. That took a big hit to him in the overall standings. But moving further down, we then have Cole in 6th with 44 points, followed by Mike Losa with 32 points, and then Anthony Madonia with 14 points. I do want to note we do have a few drivers not making it on the grid. So Cole and Anthony have unfortunately dropped out of the league due to outside reasons. So they will no longer be participating in the races. Mike Losa will be the 3rd driver that is missing this week. He is still in the league, but due to illness, Mike unfortunately had to miss the trip to Mid-Ohio. But we do have 2 guest drivers on the grid today. The first one is Mike Nigro. Mike is currently in the pit lane, has not set his fast lap yet, so he still needs to get a time up before the 8.5 minutes ends in the qualifying session. And our second driver is Mr. Seamus Dick, the owner of Apex 1. He is currently in 5th in qualifying. Seamus put up, pull up the live timings. Seamus put up a 130.8. Certainly not the best he could do. He needs to improve by at least 5.5 seconds in order to move further up the grid. But instead of moving further up, Seamus has actually just moved back 1 spot because Brian has just put up a 128.9, just 2 seconds quicker than Seamus, but still 3.5 seconds off of Shane, who's ahead of him. There we see Seamus going off track in that third sector. Last turn of the track, that is going to kill his lap time, and he does not improve. At the moment, David is leading the pack with a 123.3. That is 1.4 seconds quicker than second place, which is currently held by Steven. But David is on his out lap right now, so we are not going to focus on him. We are going to go to Victor. Victor has actually just crossed the line just as I pan over to him. Victor crossed the line with a 124.8. That is just 1/10 short of Steven, who is still in second. We still have 7 minutes left to go in this qualifying, so plenty of time left for all drivers to make up these lap times. But once this session concludes, drivers are going to have a 3 to 4 minute break, and then they will jump into race 1 out of 2 for the night. So both races tonight will be 25 minutes long. Pit stops are not required, so it's just making it pretty short sprint race. Although race 2 is bound to have some action, at least at the start, because race 2 will use a reverse grid from race 1, meaning if you finish race 1 in first place, you're going to be starting race 2 in last place, and vice versa. So you've already seen so far throughout the season that dynamic affect a few drivers, and give some of the slower drivers and drivers typically towards the back of the pack, it's given them a chance to fight at the start of the race. And we've seen a few drivers capitalize so far in the 6 races that we've had in the F4 League. But speaking of capitalizing, Victor did not capitalize on that third sector because he has just gone off track in a very similar fashion to the way Seamus has, and that will end Victor's lap. Looks like Mike has just put up his first fast lap of the session with a 126.3. That puts him ahead of Seamus by 2.5 seconds, and he would still need to beat Shane's time by 1.2 seconds in order to jump ahead into fourth. But David is currently on the fastest first and second sector of the entire session. At the moment, he's running 4/10 quicker than his previous fastest. He's about to cross the line. We'll see what he could get, but I think he's going to break into the 22s. And he does. David has put up a 122.85. That further increases the gap between himself and Steven for P1 and 2. The gap between those two drivers is now 1.8 seconds. Victor of course, still very close behind Steven's lap time. Shane is on his out lap at the moment, so we're not going to see him moving up. Seamus looks to be on his out lap as well. We're going to go on board with Mike. Mike is about to cross the line. At the moment, he's running 9 tenths quicker. And Mike improves on his lap time. He puts up a 125.7, but it's not going to be enough to gain him any further positions on the grid. Ahead of him is Shane. Mike would still need to improve on his fastest lap by 7/10 in order to overtake Shane for P4. Racing Mike, though, getting a little loose, going down the hairpin through sector 1. I'm going to go over to Victor now. Victor has just begun his hot lap. Victor, of course, just needs to improve by just 1/10 of a second in order to overtake Steven for P2. So we're going to keep a close eye on this battle. David appears to be in the pits. Might be calling it the end of his qualifying session. Still very far ahead of the rest of the pack. Brian and Seamus are very close in lap times. Only 1/10 of a second separates those two drivers. But Victor's first sector Looks to be 2.5 tenths quicker than his previous fastest. He's able to keep this up. He would overtake Steven for P2. He's going to be fighting some traffic here. I believe this is Matt close in front of him, but Victor goes off track. Victor spins, and that's going to be the end of his lap. Victor is off into the dirt. Just had one more turn left to go, and it looks like he was going to beat out Steven's lap time, but unfortunately that spin is going to put him back into the pit lane. He's going to have to take another minute and a half to make his way back around the track to begin his next hot lap. So that could be the end of Victor's qualifying session. Going to go on board with Seamus now. Seamus is making his way through Sector 3. As you see the car porpoising. What is it? Porpoising or porpoising? Porpoising. So, yeah, of course, bumpy track, as I previously mentioned. So, we're going to be seeing a lot of porpoising here from these cars as Seamus makes his way down the start-finish straight. Seamus has put up a 127.715. Did improve on his previous fastest, but it's not enough to jump ahead of Brian because Brian also just improved on his lap time. Brian put up a 126.6. Actually just improved on it again. Brian has just crossed the line with a 126.2. That's going to make the gap between those two drivers 1.5 seconds. Brian would need to improve by 4 tenths in order to overtake Mike for P5. Looks like Matt is still not set a clean lap time. Only a minute left to go in the qualifying. He's now on his hot lap though, so we'll see what he can do. So 20 seconds left to go in the qualifying. Matt has just put up his fastest first and second sector of his qualifying session. This is going to be his last lap. The time has now run out. We'll see what he can do when he crosses the line, if he's able to make up any positions. But as of right now, Matt's going to be starting the race from P8. He's going to cross the line though, and he's going to cross with a 125.6. That'll be enough to move him ahead of both Seamus and Brian. Just misses out on P5 by a tenth of a second. Mike is going to take P5 from Matt. That is now the end of Matt's session. Victor appears to have crossed the line, as well as David. Brian is currently on his hot lap. Brian is running 4 tenths quicker at the moment. See if he can improve, but he would need to be at least 3 tenths of a second faster than his previous fastest in order to overtake Matt for P6. Seamus is going to cross the line with a 128.6. Not enough to make up any positions for him. We're now going to see Brian cross the line. Brian does not improve, or sorry, Brian does improve, but only by a few hundredths of a second, which is not enough to overtake Matt for P6. So Brian's going to start the grid, race 1 from 7th place. Seamus will be starting behind him in 8th. Looks like pole position will be occupied by David with his 122.8. David 1.2 seconds faster than the next quickest driver, which was Steven. Steven is going to start the race in P2. Behind him, we're going to have Shane, followed by Victor, Mike, Matt, Brian, and then Seamus. But that is the end of the 15-minute qualifying session. We are going to have a 3.5-minute break, and then we will jump into the 25-minute long race 1 here at Mid-Ohio. So I will take a quick break, and I will be right back for the start of the race. So before we begin the race, just want to talk a little bit about the track, Mid-Ohio. So just to give you guys a brief history on Mid-Ohio, this track was opened up in 1962, of course, in the state of Ohio. It was actually carved completely through farmlands, which you could see a little bit from the environment, and you could definitely feel from the bumps on the tracks. But this is a 2.2 mile layout, 13 turns with 130 feet of elevation change. That's going to make brake balance and weight transfer especially tough here in these lighter F4 cars. I also do want to point out it is a bit of a more narrow track. Drivers often call it the bowling alley, actually. But it's going to make for some tough racing and make it hard for drivers to overtake. But there are a few key points in the track where these drivers will be able to make their overtakes. The first is through turn 2, otherwise known as keyhole. And then the second will be through turn 4, leading into the S's. These are the two main points drivers will be looking to make their overtakes. Everywhere else on the track is, like I said, pretty tight, very, very difficult and unique track. Also want to point out turns 12 and 13, which is the carousel. This will be especially demanding on those front left tires. That will lead into the long straightaway. But overall, it is a pretty cold and low grip track, and should make for some interesting racing dynamics. Luckily for all drivers, it is clear and dry today, but the lights are now about to go out, and we are going to get underway for the start of race 1. But here we are. Race 1 is underway. The lights have gone out. David is leading the race at the moment. Steven is in second. Shane behind him in third. David getting a nice start, jumping well ahead of Steven. Shane is getting closer to Steven. He's going to go side by side for a second, but tuck right behind. But David kicks up some dirt. David has gone off track. A big mistake there from David has moved him from first all the way down into 6th place. Briefly moved into 7th, but he was able to overtake Seamus immediately after re-entering the track. Seamus and Brian are now going side by side. They're about to head into the S's, but Seamus goes off track. Brian jumps ahead of him. Shane leading the race at the moment, with Steven just a few tenths behind. You've already seen a few mistakes, but all drivers have kept it on track. But just as I say that, Matt has a spin. Matt goes off track, and that is going to move him down into 8th. Although Victor's off track as well. So Victor is now going to drop back into 8th as Matt moves up into 7th. Bit of a pack form at the front between the top 3 drivers. Shane and Steven close to each other, and Mike trying to catch up, not sitting too far back behind. He does have a 2-second gap to Brian, who's the driver behind 4. And Shane spins. Shane is going to lose the lead. Steven moves into 1st, but Mike is just close behind him. Mike is now battling it out with Steven. This is the battle for P1. We're only 3 minutes left, or we're only 3 minutes into the race. 22 minutes left. So plenty of time for all drivers to battle it out and make up any mistakes that they previously made. But Steven is leading the race. Mike continues to look for a move, but he's going to be patient. Behind him is Brian, who sits 2 seconds back. Matt has just put up the fastest lap of the race. And it looks like Shane just had another mistake, because Shane has lost another position, moving back from P6 down to P7. Tough race for the drivers that started the race towards the top of the pack. Both Shane and Victor are now the 2 drivers at the back. Mike continues to stay right behind Steven. This is the closest gap we have at the moment between all the drivers. Mike goes off into the dirt though. That's going to cost him a few tenths and put him further back behind Steven. Mike is now just under 1.5 seconds behind Steven. That mistake has allowed Brian to get closer. Brian now sits just over a second behind Mike. But David has now put up the fastest lap of the session, and David is now inching closer to Brian. This will soon be a battle for P3, although the battle for P2 is well underway because Mike has slowed down just enough to allow Brian to catch up to him. There's now a 2-way battle between Mike and Brian. David is about to enter the mix and make it a 3-way battle for P2, 3, and 4. Here you see the drivers making their way through the S's now. But David has made a clean move on the outside, zipping past Brian. That'll be P3 for David, and an easy and very well planned overtake from him. David is now going to have his eyes on P2, who is half of a second ahead of him. Although David is very quickly shrinking this gap. Matt has also just overtaken Seamus for P5. David now well within the slipstream of Mike. We'll see if he can get a run going down the long straightaway. This is the longest straightaway of the track. It does allow these drivers to get some momentum in the draft of the driver ahead. There you see both cars very violently bouncing as they make their way through the S's. Both drivers going side by side. Wheel-to-wheel racing at its finest. Keeping it clean. Mike's going to hold the outside. David went on the inside, but David is now on the outside as the two make the right-hand turns. But Mike is going to hold off his position and remain ahead. Great defending there from Mike. I think Seamus just made a mistake though, because Seamus has just lost 2 positions. And David and Mike are going side by side. Mike goes off into the dirt though, and that's going to allow David to make the overtake for P2. David putting on the pressure, and the pressure is too much for Mike as Mike falls behind, and that's now going to allow Brian to get within the slipstream of Mike. This is now a battle for P3. Might be seeing Mike lose 2 positions here on this lap alone. 17 minutes left to go in the race though, so plenty of time left for all these drivers. And Victor spins, or sorry, that was Mike. Mike spins. That's going to cost him 2 positions. He's going to try to recover and go right into the wall. That'll lose him another 3 positions. A brutal lap there from Mike. Was sitting very comfortable for a bit, but has a spin. And there you see, he spins once again. I'm going to assume those are going to be from his now overheated tires. But that mistake has now moved Mike all the way back to the end of the pack. He still needs to make up 10 seconds in order to make any position moves. So that spin would make Mike's race just that much tougher. Now has plenty of work to do to make up his time. We're now going to go on board with Victor here for a bit. Victor is sitting 1.5 seconds behind Shane. This is the battle for P4, sorry, for P5. The last lap, Shane's last lap was a 126.2. Victor's last lap was a 125.6. So if Victor's able to maintain this consistency, he should be able to catch up to Shane within the next couple of laps. But I'm going to jump ahead back on board with David, because David has just put up a purple sector 2. David currently holds the fastest lap of the session with a 123.2. His last lap was a 123.6, which is 1.3 seconds quicker than Steven's last lap. But just as I'm talking about the two, Matt and Brian had a position change. Apologize to the viewers for any of these overtakes that I'm missing, but there are a few battles going on here at the same time. But we're now going to focus on the battle for P1, of course. This is where the most points are on the line. Seeing the timing board, Matt and Brian continue to swap positions. Matt now jumping back ahead of Brian to move into P3. David still planning his overtake. Still sitting half a second behind Steven. I think he's going to play the cautious game make sure that he plans it out well. Of course, there is still a good amount of time left. He doesn't want to get too eager and end up causing an incident which would only hurt both drivers. He still is running faster than Steven. His last lap was 4 tenths quicker to be exact. David is going to make a run on the inside. We'll see if he could stick the move, and he does. David is going to brake late and zip past Steven. P1 is now secured for David. He'll now be looking to put his head down and continue to put down his fastest laps and increase that gap between himself and Steven. But a nice move there from David. He's shown so far he's been the most consistent driver here in Mid-Ohio. And it's definitely paid off so far. If he's able to hold on to his result, he'd get 25 points for first, and then an extra 2 points for fastest lap, which would put him at 27 in total. Perfect result if he's able to hang on, of course. But we are now going to jump back around the board. Let's take a look on board with Brian. Brian currently sitting in P4 in the Red Bull Racing, Ford Racing livery. But just want to talk a bit about these cars as Brian makes his way around Mid-Ohio. So these are the Formula 4 cars, FIA spec, of course. And for those that are wondering, to start, what is a Formula 4 car? This is the entry-level car in the open-wheel pyramid, if you would call it. So most, if not all of you will know F1 cars. Those are the 800, 900 horsepower beasts that are driven by world-famous drivers, Lewis Hamilton, Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris, etc. But besides F1, taking a step down from that, you're then going to move into F2. Those cars, similar body styles, but with around 600 horsepower. And just as I say that, though, Brian is going to go off track. That mistake is going to allow Shane to move ahead of him. Victor has gone off track as well. I was going to say Victor would catch up to Brian after that mistake, but this mistake from Victor is going to end up costing him a position to Seamus. Seamus has moved up into P6. But just going back into the open wheel pyramid, so below F1 cars, we have the Formula 2s. Those are about 650-ish horsepower. Those are raced many times in the F1, during the F1 calendar. They're used as support races to happen before the F1 race occurs. You also see many world-famous drivers, such as Leclerc and I believe as well. Those drivers were F2 before F1. But moving further down, you'll then see the F3 cars. Those cars will be about 300-ish horsepower. And then finally, below those is the Formula 4 car, which is the entry-level open-wheel car that has aero. These cars are about 160 horsepower, powered by a 2-liter Honda engine. They are just about 1,300 pounds without the driver. So very light, very nimble cars. They're a bit more mechanical and more manual, less assistance than the typical F1 car. Brian goes off track though. I'm going to cut myself off again because Seamus has now jumped ahead of him. as well as Victor. Another costly mistake from one of the drivers on the grid. But yeah, these cars are very, very manual cars. And not in terms of the gearbox. They are, of course, semi-automatic, meaning you can start the car with the clutch. Then once you get started, all you need is the paddle shifters to change gears. But unlike F1 cars, there is no push to pass. There is no DRS. These cars also don't have traction control or ABS. It's pretty much the driver in the car. But Victor is going to go side by side with Seamus. This is the battle for P5. Victor is able to complete the move, although Seamus still remains close behind. Great move there for Victor. He's going to hang on to it for now. But 7.5 minutes left in the race. David continues to lead and has only increased his gap. He is ahead of Steven by 3.5 seconds. And behind Steven is Matt, who's currently sitting in third, with a 6-second gap between himself and Steven. But Seamus spins, and that's going to lose him a position to Brian. Brian slowed down, I think trying to avoid the incident and the spin from Seamus. But that's going to allow Mike to move ahead of both Seamus and Brian. Mike capitalizing on the mistaken slowdown from both drivers. Now sitting about 0.5 second ahead of Brian. And Brian's going to spin again. I think he got a little eager there, trying to make up the time from his previous mistake. He doesn't lose a position from that though, because Seamus is still 3.5 seconds behind. And Seamus locks up his fronts and has another spin. That is going to end his hopes of catching up to Brian. 5 minutes left to go in the race. Not much time left. And there is an 8.5 second gap between the two drivers. So I think that'll end Seamus's race. Finish him in P8. Not the result he was looking for, but if he's able to stay in P8, the good news for him is that he'll at least start race 2 in the front of the pack. But it looks like Mike has made a mistake. Mike was slowed down for a bit, although he's back on track now. But looking at the timing board, Matt has put up the fastest third sector of the session by 0.8 of a second. But David still holds the best lap of the race, also by 0.8 of a second. So it looks like Matt's fastest lap is a 124 flat. Meanwhile, David's is a 123.2. But there you see Matt showing that there is at least 0.8 of a second to be made up, even from David's fastest lap. So plenty left on the table here. 4 minutes left to go, so not much time for these drivers to get the fastest lap. But looks like most of them will be staying where they are in terms of positioning, unless there's any major mistakes. But with that said, there is still 3.5 minutes left to fight for the fastest lap, and these are very valuable points. 2 points will be earned to the driver that gets the fastest lap. It doesn't matter if you finish in first or in last, you'll still earn those extra 2 points if you get the fastest lap. So certainly a lot still on the line for these drivers at Mid-Ohio. But the race will soon be coming to a close. We have now hit the 22-minute mark in the race. 3 minutes remaining. David continues to hold the lead, but Mike spins. I was just saying that all the drivers are going to be secured in their current place unless they made any major mistakes, and Mike is the first to do so, and that spin will cost him P6 and allow Brian to move ahead of him. But besides that, it looks like the closest gap is between Matt and Steven, although it's not the closest of gaps. It is 2.2 seconds, although Matt's last lap was a 123.8, which is his fastest lap of his race so far. So Matt continues to lower his lap times. He's just put up another 123.8. So he's catching up to Steven by about a second per lap in the last 2 laps. He's still behind him by 2 seconds though, with only 2 minutes left to go in the race. So I think we're going to be seeing this lap and then the white flag shortly after this lap concludes. But Matt's going to be looking to put on the pressure over Steven, see if he could force any mistakes. But other than that, it looks like all the drivers are pretty much done and dusted in terms of where they are in the race. Just saw Matt locking up his front rights a bit. That might cost him a bit of lap time. Matt now within a second of Steven. We'll see if he can do it. His last lap was 0.8 quicker than Steven. He did drop off on his previous lap by about half a second though. So I think he's making a little bit of mistakes trying to push the car. But there you see the timer at the top has gone out, meaning all drivers are now on their last lap of the race. Both drivers making their way through that second sector, but the time is now running out for Matt. I think the only thing he could hope for at this point is a big mistake from Steven. We'll see if it happens though. 2 drivers now approaching the last turn. Steven maintaining control, although he misses the apex. Matt's going to get a bit closer heading down the straightaway, but it's not going to be enough. Both drivers now crossing the line. That'll be the end of their race. David has crossed the line in first. Steven finishes in second. Matt will finish the race in third. Those are the 3 podium finishers for race 1. Shane will soon be crossing the line for 4th. Just misses out on that podium spot, although still a pretty good result for him. Good points on the board. And there you see it, Shane crosses the line as well. P4 for him. Next up is going to be Victor. And Victor now crosses the line for P5. Exciting first race with some fireworks to start. David started the race in first, but jumped down all the way to the back of the pack after just a few turns. We saw a few incidents throughout the race as well as some spins, but David remained the most consistent and was able to make up all the positions that he lost. But that is the end of race 1. There you have it, Mike doing some donuts. Mike, of course, the celebrity driver. I don't know if he's aware that there will be a second race. But that is all for race 1, guys. I will be back shortly for the start of race 2. We're going to be beginning in about 4-ish minutes. It is a reverse grid, so Seamus will start the second race in first. Mike's going to start the second race in second place. And then Brian will be starting in third. Right, and it is lights out and away we go. We're here at the start of race 2. Seamus leading the pack. David has just made a few overtakes. Shane's going to be looking to make a move on the inside of Victor for P2. Not able to do it though. He's going to stay on the outside, bump Victor a little bit, and that's going to slow him down and allow David to get quicker. David had a quicker run for a moment, but isn't able to capitalize. Matt is now right on the rear end of David in the battle for P4. And Seamus goes off track. That'll cost him P1 and move him down into 7th. Huge mistake there from Seamus on lap 1. Sorry, that was actually the start of lap 2. A mistake there from him. But Victor is leading the race at the moment with Shane very close behind. And then David is sitting just behind him in P3. Shane's going to look to get on the outside of Victor. We'll see if he could complete this move. Victor's going to hold this position though. David goes side by side with Shane for a split second, but it's not going to be enough. Matt has now entered the mix as well. This is a 4-way battle. Although Victor's still sitting about a half second ahead of the other drivers. Matt's going to have a bit of a run down David going through the S's. And Matt completes the overtake down the inside. That's now P3 for Matt. Clean move from him. Now going to jump ahead on board with Shane. This is the battle for P1. Both drivers making their way down the long straightaway, approaching the S's, but Victor continues to hold the inside. Shane's going to have a faster run though. Set himself up for a great exit. I don't know if that's going to be enough though, because Victor continues to hold on and continues to defend very well. And Matt now makes his way down the inside. That is now an overtake for Matt. Matt moves up into P2. Shane slows down and David is also going to jump ahead and make the overtake. Shane has just lost 2 positions on the last 2 turns alone. David moving up into 3rd. Matt in 2nd. Meanwhile, Victor still holds on to the lead. We're also going to keep an eye on the timing board in the battle for P6 between Seamus and Steven. Steven looks to be getting closer and closer to Seamus. But Victor and Matt go side by side as Victor continues to hold the lead. And Matt gets grazed by David. Matt gets taken out. Brian gets caught in the crossfire as well. Shane, though, getting the worst end of it. Shane goes way off track. But Victor there was holding off Matt. Meanwhile, David was catching up to Matt. And then David appeared to just tap the rear end of Matt, causing him to spin. Matt took out Shane in the process. So David may be looking at a penalty for that, but it will be, of course, up to a post-race review. Speaking of that, I actually just want to make sure that I get the replay file saved. We're now on board with David through his helmet cam as he continues to get closer and closer to Victor. He's now going to look to make the move on the inside. We'll see if he could stick it. He now has the outside line as they go through the S's. Victor continues to hold off on that spot though. And David has a spin, loses traction, but is able to somehow keep it on track. A huge drift there from David. Goes through the grass, but is still on track. Meanwhile, Seamus has just overtaken Steven for P4. Shane and Matt are also very close. This is the battle for P6. Both drivers were looking very well off in the race just 2 laps ago, until the incident from David and Matt sent Matt into a spin and caught Shane in the crossfire. So these 2 drivers are now sitting near the back of the pack with plenty of work left to do, but 17 minutes left to go. So they do still have a lot of time to make up their time that they lost. Steven continues to remain close behind Seamus in the battle for P4. Meanwhile, David is getting closer and closer to Victor. David put up the fastest lap of the race. His last lap was a 126.3. Victor's last lap was a 126.4. But Steven has made a mistake, and that has cost Steven 2 positions, moving him down into 7th place. And David has a big mistake trying to overtake Victor. David goes straight into the wall. And then, I don't know if he accidentally sent himself to the pits, but David is now at the back of the pack. There you see how quick things can turn around and completely flip upside down for these drivers. David was in second, looking to make the overtake for P1, and just like that, he's now at the back of the pack, sitting 4 seconds behind Mike. Plenty of work for David to do now with 15 minutes left in the race. Luckily for him, he does at least hold the fastest lap of the session, which would earn him an extra 2 points. But David now has a lot of work on his hands in order to make up those positions that he just lost. But we're now going to jump on board with Shane, because Shane is within half a second of Matt in the battle for P4. Shane should hopefully look to get into the slipstream of Matt. able to keep getting closer. We're not going to be in the slipstream yet, though, because the gap is just above 1 second. This is the battle for P3 between Matt and Seamus. This battle is starting to heat up. Seamus's last lap was a 125.8. Matt's last lap was a 124.1. So Matt has very quickly narrowed down this gap, and he's now going to be within the slipstream of Seamus. He's going to make his way down the long straightaway. Matt's going to position himself for the inside line. We'll see if he breaks later, and he is going to break later. Locks up the front right a bit, but he's going to hold the move and make the overtake for P3. Great racing there from Matt, and that pressure is going to be too much for Seamus, as Seamus has now conceded his position to Shane as well. Seamus losing 2 positions going through the S's, now drops back into 5th. Still sitting a second ahead of Steven, who's behind him in P6. But Shane spins, and Shane has now lost 2 positions from that spin. And Brian spins as well. Brian, I think, is going to lose a position from that. And Brian, I think, spun into the pits. I don't know if that was intentional, but Brian entered the pit lane, was slowed down a ton, and has now dropped back into P8. Huge mistake there from him. We've already seen many of the drivers have spins, but I think that was the worst, one of the worst ones of the race so far. As that actually ended up forcing him to get onto the pit limiter and cost him a few positions. But after all those mistakes, Victor is now sitting comfortably in the lead by 7 seconds. Behind him is Matt, and then Seamus in P3, followed by Steven in P4. He continues to stay close to Seamus, although not close enough to make any sort of moves, but we'll see what he could do in the next few laps. With 10.5 minutes to go, we are over halfway through the second race here at Mid-Ohio. And Seamus slows down, and that's going to be enough for Steven to move through. Shane is going to move through as well. Seamus appears to be struggling, though, in that last turn. And just as I say that, he clips the dirt and has a huge spin. That is going to cost him a few seconds at the very least, and will move him even further behind Shane. And Steven spins as well. Another mistake from one of the drivers on the grid. That'll move Shane ahead. Seamus jumps ahead, as well as David. So 3 positions lost from Steven on that mistake. David now has made up 3 positions since dropping down into 8th place. We'll see what he could do, but David holds the fastest lap of the race and is currently a 2.5 behind Seamus. I do predict he'll be catching up fairly soon, but we'll see what he could do. And Seamus slows down once again going through that last turn. It's the point of struggle for him. And David is going to go through for the overtake for P4. Board with Mike now as he gets a little loose in the rear going through the hairpin. That turn also proving to be a struggle for many of these drivers. A lot of them losing that rear grip going down the elevation change. The bumpiness of the road certainly does not help either. But at the moment, Mike is in 7th, has a pretty sizable gap to the driver in front, as do all the drivers on the grid. So just as I said last race, only 6 minutes to go. Not much time for these drivers to naturally make up their gaps and make moves, but it is a very bumpy and tough track, which means that any mistake from these drivers can lose them a few positions, which we've already seen many times throughout both races here. But Victor continues to hold the lead, although his gap has decreased by a second since I've last spoken on his lead. This will be some great points for Victor, though, if he's able to hold on. At the moment, Victor's in 4th in the standings. He is sitting just 3 points behind Shane and Steven, though, and just 6 points behind Brian. So this will certainly move him up a few positions in the league standings if he's able to hold on. but we are now going to go into the battle for P3 because it appears David has made a mistake, which has sorry, that was a position change that I missed. So Shane made a mistake, which allowed David to overtake him for P3. You're out of here? But we're not in like... Where do you think we live? Alright guys, so I have been informed there are northern lights in New Jersey at the moment. I don't know if you can't see them, right? Alright, yeah. So I was right. Lily, do you want to explain yourself? So yeah, I don't know what happened, guys. Cole and Lily thought there was northern lights outside. There are not. We are not in Iceland or Greenland. I don't know which one. Iceland. We're not in Iceland. We're pretty far from that. But speaking of far from that, David is far from the track because David has just spun, and that has cost him a position to Shane. Two minutes left to go. It looks like Matt has continued to decrease the gap between himself and Victor in the battle for P1. Victor was sitting very comfortably in first for the entire race, but the battle is now heating up. It appears that we're gonna have like 2 laps left to go in the race, but the gap between these two drivers is now under a second. Victor's last lap was a 125.2. Matt's last lap was a 123.2. So Matt running 2 seconds quicker in his last lap alone. Gap is 7/10 at the moment. There's a minute left. Oh, that was the... I didn't hit live. I was showing you guys the replay. And Matt is now going side by side with Victor in the battle for P1. Matt pushes him off track a bit, but Victor's going to hold on to the lead. Both drivers now in their last lap of the race. Victor holds on half a second ahead. Two drivers are about to make their way through the hairpin. There's going to be one of the overtaking zones as they approach the long straightaway. Victor's going to miss the apex though. And Matt's going to make his way down the inside. We'll see if he has a better run. Looks like he's slightly ahead at the moment. Although Victor seems to be gaining a bit more speed. These two drivers are now completely side by side. Matt's going to have the inside line though. He's going to brake a bit later and make the overtake for P1. We'll see if he could hold it. Both drivers now making their way through the second sector. This is, again, the last lap of the race. But Victor falls behind. And I think that's now going to be first place secured for Matt. We'll see if he can hang on to it. But Victor has now fallen a second behind. He was most certainly feeling the pressure from Matt. We'll see if Matt can hold on. I think he's going to. And there it is. Matt has now crossed the line for first place. Victor will cross the line for P2. That's the end of their race. Shane is about to cross the line for P3. He'll be the last podium finisher on the night. Great result from all three of those drivers. David is going to cross the line for P4. He also did finish with the fastest lap of the session, which will earn him an extra 2 points, finishing him with 17 points on this race. Looks like Steven will cross the line for 5th. Mike finishing close behind in 6th. But another chaotic race. Saw many overtakes and mistakes from all drivers. But that is the end of week 4 here at Mid-Ohio. You see Mike doing some donuts to end the session. But that is all for the night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys all for tuning in. We will be back next Wednesday for week 5, the season finale of the F4 League. Week 5. Where are we basically at? Sorry, there's so much going on that I lose track. Road Atlanta, yes. So week 5 will be at Road Atlanta, the short configuration. But that is all for me at the broadcast for the night. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys all again next week.